The anatomy of the sheep brain. So this first part here is the spinal cord, which we'll get into in a moment. This first section back here is called the cerebellum. It is a major section of the hindbrain and is responsible for coordinated movement, balance, and posture. The largest part of the brain is referred to as the cortex, which is part of the forebrain. It is responsible for neural integration with roles in attention, perception, language, and consciousness. And as I flip it over, we see this is where the olfactory bulbs would sit. They are located close to the long-term memory storage. This little crossing over section here is called the optic chiasm. It is important because information from the left eye goes to the right hemisphere of the brain and vice versa. This is actually the most anterior part of the spinal cord. And so you see these outer coverings here. These are actually called meninges, and there are three layers of meninges, which are membranes that protect the brain and spinal cord. So I'm going to remove them here because we don't really need them for the dissection. However, I do remove the optic chiasm and some other structures. Just wanted you to know what I was doing there. And here we get a good ventral view of the brain. And I'm going to turn it to the side so we can get a good look at the hindbrain structures. Beginning with the most caudal, we have the spinal cord. This is how signals from the brain get to and from the peripheral nervous system. Moving up slightly, we have the medulla oblongata, which is responsible for autonomic functions such as sneezing and breathing. Then moving caudally from the medulla oblongata, we have the pons, which connects the cerebrum and the cerebellum. And then finally, in the most rostral or caudal position where my thumb is pointing, we have the midbrain. It is responsible for crucial functions such as alertness, temperature regulation, motor control, as well as many others. And then I rotate the brain. So again, we're looking at it from a top-down view or from the dorsal area. And here I give you a chance to look on the inside to see where the cerebellum and the cerebrum would connect. You can see this line dividing the brain into the left and right hemispheres, which is called the longitudinal fissure. And in a moment, I'm going to cut down the center of the brain along the sagittal plane, so down that longitudinal fissure. And that way we're going to get a view of the interior structures of the brain. And so I cut it into the left and right hemispheres. And we're going to first look at the left hemisphere. So here we go. And so when I get my pointer, I'm going to first point out the most rostral point on the brain. That is where the olfactory bulbs would be located. And here we have the corpus callosum. It is the largest collection of white matter in the brain, and it connects the right and left hemispheres of the brain. Next, we get a medial look at the sulci and gyri. The gyri are the ridges and the sulci are the grooves, and that adds surface area to the cortex. And so next I want to show you the pineal body, which is actually a little bit more caudal than my pointer is on, but just imagine a few millimeters caudal to that is the pineal body, which is an endocrine gland which produces melatonin, and it is necessary for proper circadian rhythm regulation. And here I remove some brain goop. And then next I'm going to go ahead and talk about the thalamus, which is this big area here that my pointer is on. It works to relay motor and sensory signals to the cerebral cortex, and it's a very large structure, as you can see. And then right underneath it would be where the infundibulum, which is the pituitary stalk, the most ventral part of that would be where the pituitary gland would be found, but it most likely became disconnected when the brain was removed. And so next I'm going to pick up the right hemisphere of the brain, so you can see how the structures are mostly symmetrical. The anatomy looks very similar. However, we can see that the cerebellum is still attached in the caudal region of the brain. And I'm going to give us a second to look into the cerebellum, which I'm going to cut into it so you can see the arbor vitae. This is the white matter of the cerebellum. It allows sensory and motor information to both enter and exit the cerebellum. It's typically branched, which is how it gets its name. However, it's very hard to see in this brain. But you can see the large amount of white matter in this area of the brain. So the next thing I'm going to do is make another cut into the brain, and this will give us a coronal section so we can see the white and the gray matter. And here is where the gray matter sits, which are the neuronal cell bodies, and they are on the cortex, or the outermost part of the brain. And so we can also see the white matter, which are the myelinated axons. And here I'm going to put the two halves of the brain back together. And where my pointer is situated is the approximate location of the third ventricle. In mammalian brains, there are 4 ventricles, which are all connected, and they are fluid-filled cavities within the brain. And so here, again, is the cerebellum, and just so you can see how everything is situated. And there you go. That is the sheep brain.